Hey guys, so in last video you remember that we discussed about what is actuator in Spring Boot, and we saw that there are three endpoints that we discussed about, like health endpoint, matrix endpoint, and info endpoint, right? But are there only three endpoints? No, there are a lot of endpoints, right? So let me show you to a lot of what are the endpoints that are present, right? So what we'll do is we will go to this website that I've already opened, and if you see, so there are a lot of endpoints mentioned here for the actuators. So it is slash audit events, beans, conditions, config props, info, head dump, health, flyaway, environment, loggers, log file, matrix, sessions, scheduled tasks, shutdown, and thread dump. So these are like some of the endpoints. These are also not the complete list. So these are some of the endpoints that are used in your that you can use in your application as an actuator, right? So in the last video we discussed three endpoints, like three major endpoints that we commonly used. That was health endpoint, matrix endpoint, and info endpoint. So we'll discuss about them in this video, and we'll see what is these endpoints and what values that they contain, what are the components of these endpoints, right? So let's go back to this PPT that I created, slide basically. So health endpoint basically used to manage or see the overall status and the operational readiness of the application. What does it mean? It means that, for example, your application connects to a database and you wanted to check whether the database connection is complete or not, whether it is proper or not, right? So you can use this health endpoint, right? What is the disk space you wanted to see? Whether there is any free disk space or not, right? So you can use this health endpoint. Then you can see this use this health endpoint to manage the REST APIs. For example, your application would have different components and services running, right? And you wanted to see whether this particular service is up and down. You wanted to know the status of that service, right? So you can use this health endpoint. And then there's memory usage and custom health indicators. So this custom health indicator is what, like, we can create our own health endpoint using a Spring Boot, and there we can add our own values to see what values that we want to see when we trigger that endpoint, right? So then comes this example. So this is basically the endpoint. So if I go back to my URL, so yesterday you remember that the last video basically I ran that actuator code. I wrote a simple actuator code and triggered these endpoint. So if I go to this health endpoint, you will see that we have this component, and then there will be status, right? And then there's ping, right? So in this component, disk space can be there, then DB can also be there, right? If you have a DB connection happening, so it can be there also, right? So this, what is the status up? So a status up means that your service, your the application is running, right? So there can be four type of status: up, down, unknown, or out of service, right? So if I go back to this example, so you can see in the components, I have this space, then I have this a DB state. So it says the status is up and the database name is MySQL, right? So we had the details for the hello endpoint that we are getting, right? Now go to the other endpoint, that is matrix endpoint, right? So basically this endpoint tells you about the application runtime behavior and performance. For example, what is the CPU usage, memory usage, or disk space being utilized while your application is running? What are the JVM configurations that are being consumed? What are the garbage collection stats, right? What are the monitoring stats and counter being used, right? So it tells you these details when you trigger this endpoint. So basically, if you go to this endpoint, let me go to this endpoint, right? You will see that there are a lot of parameters that are present here, like, right? So Tomcat session rejected, expired, then there's JVM options, right? Executor options, thread options are basically there, then Dix options are there, application options are there, right? So basically these options are there that we can use to and check the values, right? For example, if I copy this, disk free, and if I go to back to this URL and add this, right? So you will be able to see what value does this disk free contains, right? So it will tell you the description also, like what value it is containing. So it tells us that it will have the usable space for path. For example, this is my value path, right? And this is the value, and this is the value that is present, right? So it is telling all the details. We are not going into the details how these details are being consumed in your application and from where it is coming. We will just see that values are coming or not and what values it is coming, right? So let's see some other endpoints also, right? So let's take this JVM compilation time, right? Not sure whether this value will come or not, but let's see. Yeah, so it is coming. So it tells that the approximate accumulated elapsed time spent in compilation. So whatever the time it took to compile my code, it is telling that, right? So it took 15051 milliseconds. So measurement it is giving. So in the unit milliseconds, ms is there, so it means millisecond. So these are the basically the matrix that are available, which we can use in the endpoint and check the value, right? Now there's another endpoint called info endpoint. So basically, as a name suggests, info endpoint contains the information about your application. So anything you wanted to include, such as version name, build details, custom application data. So you can create your info endpoint, like custom endpoint you can create. So you can use these details for debugging or for just knowing that which version of your application it is currently running. You can use it for monitoring or debugging, right? So just a simple info endpoint. For my application, it is not showing because I haven't configured any info. But if I do, so you can see that it is still running. But if I add any custom endpoint and configure the details here, so it will come here, right? For now, it is giving me an empty JSON, right? So these are the three endpoints which we basically use, or we can commonly use in an application. There are others as I've shown you. So there are other also info, then head dump, then health is there, flyway is there, env is there, config props is there. So config props is also the one of the endpoint that we use. Then it is beans are also there, shutdown is there, sessions is there. So we these are the metrics we basically used in an application. So I just share you the three examples to understand, right?